Hello and welcome once again to another edition of The Blueprint, Canada's Conservative podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Schmale, Member of Parliament for Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock, broadcasting live from my constituency office in the beautiful province of Ontario. The town is called Lindsay, and thank you very much for joining us. A lot's been happening since the last time we met. The WE scandal continues to develop and unfold. We're going to talk to Michael Barrett. He's the Member of Parliament for Leeds-Grenville-Thousand Island and Rideau Lakes. I guess the show's over with the riding name he has. And he's also the critic for ethics. You might have seen him in the news lately. He's been talking a lot about that. We'll get to him in just a moment. Part two of the Blueprint. On the second half, we have Marty Morantz. He's the Member of Parliament out in Manitoba. He's the Shadow Minister for National Revenue. We're going to talk to him about the Conservatives' back to work plan, given that the economy is starting to reopen, given that CERB, the Canadian Emergency Response Benefits, is holding some people back from re-entering the workforce when it's safe to do so. We're going to talk about some of the tweaks the Conservative Party is proposing to get the economy back on track. So as mentioned, we have Michael Barrett, the Member of Parliament for Leeds-Grenville-Thousand Island, Rideau Lakes, just down the highway from my riding. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hey, thanks very much for having me, Jamie. It's a real pleasure.
And just as a reminder for your viewers, if they aren't able to continue watching on this platform, you can listen to it on platforms like Castbox, iTunes, Google Play, that type of thing. Share it, comment, subscribe, like, help us push back against the ever-moving Liberal agenda. So, Michael Barrett, Justin Trudeau is sorry again, and maybe a life lesson for all of us. Again, the WE scandal continues to develop. We have $912 million given to the WE charity to help with youth volunteers. And now we have the contract being taken back. Why don't you tell us a bit about that?
Well, look, we had an apology from Justin Trudeau yesterday, and this is a prime minister who's only ever sorry when he gets caught. Just 5 days ago, Jamie, we heard from Justin Trudeau when he unapologetically told Canadians that he didn't recuse himself from cabinet discussions involving the WE organization. And we know now that his family, the members of the Trudeau family, have received more than $300,000 from this organization, the same organization that the government of Canada created a program out of thin air worth $912 million, nearing $1 billion. The organization would have enjoyed a $20 million administration fee. That would have been the benefit to them. And this was all in parallel to the Canada Summer Jobs Program, which is a successful program administered by Canada's Professional Public Service. Conservatives asked for more funding for that program this year. The Liberals said no, and instead awarded this very rich contract to this group with direct financial ties to Justin Trudeau's family. We learned in the last couple of days that Finance Minister Bill Morneau has family members who are paid employees of the organization as well. And now we're hearing more about Liberal ties to this organization, including the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, Katie Telford, his Minister Seamus O'Regan. And they're sorry that they got caught, but they're telling us that it's just, won't someone think of the children? And that's the shield that they want to use on this, that they were just really looking out for Canadians. But what they were looking out for were Justin Trudeau's friends first and putting Canadians second.
Well, it's interesting how they frame it too. It's all about the children, right? How can you disagree? It's about the children. Well, it's about giving almost $1 billion to your friends, giving them a $20 million paycheck for distributing this program and executing it. And then what do they expect to do with these volunteers? I know through media reports and the work you're doing on the file, and hats off to you and your team who are putting in the extra hours uncovering and unraveling all of this. What were they supposed to do with these volunteers? I know WE apparently was scheduled to get about 400 volunteers to work on whatever project this entailed.
Yeah, and that's really one of the strange aspects of this whole story. We saw the CBC actually reported today, and things are bad for the Liberals when the CBC is breaking bad news about a story. But there's a lot to go around for members of the media on this. Canada Land was very early in reporting, in breaking this story. And we saw today that smaller charities were going to be paid sums of money, finder's fees to find volunteers and basically create volunteer positions. And teachers were going to be paid as a kind of a side gig, $10,000 or $12,000 to find volunteers and create volunteer positions. So it very much seemed like a make work project, not something that this organization that was receiving this contract was specifically skilled to do. And so that's why there's these questions that have come up about why this charity was picked to deliver on this program. And when we see the financial ties to the Trudeau family, to Bill Morneau, to other members of the Prime Minister's inner circle, that's why late last week I joined our colleague MP Pierre Poilievre in announcing that we'd be asking the Mounties to take a look at if a criminal investigation were warranted, because you and I both know that Justin Trudeau has twice been found to have broken the law with the Conflict of Interest Act, and now there are broader questions about what laws may have been broken.
So it's a laundry list of Liberals that are connected with this We charity, and Finance Minister Bill Morneau did not recuse himself. The Prime Minister didn't recuse himself. Did any of the other cabinet ministers that have been involved with the charity, do you know if they recused themselves from that decision-making process?
Well, this is a good question, and we don't know. Most of the ministers that responded to media inquiries about this, because now we are getting the committee process going, and we will be making different asks from different committees. The Ethics Committee will have its emergency meeting this week to start dealing with this issue. Government Operations is looking at this. Finance Committee is dealing with this. And the response from members of cabinet is that, well, that's a cabinet confidence. I can't reveal whether or not I recused myself from the conversation. And so that's really misapplying the intent, the spirit of cabinet confidentiality. We know Justin Trudeau used cabinet confidence to obstruct the ethics commissioner's investigation in the Trudeau report too. That was his involvement in the SNC-Lavalin scandal. 9 people had testimony to give or evidence to present to the ethics commissioner, but they couldn't because they were told it would reveal a confidence of the Queen's Privy Council, meaning the Prime Minister muzzled them with cabinet confidence.
So you are supposed to believe, Michael Barrett and Canadians in general, that the public service, which had just distributed billions of dollars in emergency payments through a wide range of programs, just could not handle anymore. They were done. They were at their limit, and another charity should take over, another organization outside government. That's what we're supposed to believe, because it's all about the kids.
That's right. It's all about the kids, and we're going to bench the public service, is what Justin Trudeau said. And in fact, he's saying that they told him they couldn't handle it. This would be the first time ever that I'm aware of where you have the public service advising cabinet, you know what we should do? We should privatize this new program worth $1 billion. And instead of expanding on a program we're already administering, let's outsource this to an organization with no experience ever doing anything like this. And now we're hearing that they didn't have a network to achieve this, and that's why they were reaching out to other charities. Now, every organization they contact, and what we're hearing is every person that wants to speak out against We, this group, they're being told that they're not allowed. They're being muzzled, and that is very concerning. If there's nothing to hide, I think that everyone involved needs to allow sunlight to shine in and disinfect the cloud of suspicion that has been cast over everyone concerned. I'm particularly concerned with the damage that this does to our public institutions, to public confidence in Parliament, in the Prime Minister's office. And while I am no fan of, and brace yourself, Jamie, and I hope Canadians are ready to hear this, I'm not a big fan of Justin Trudeau as the Prime Minister of Canada, but I have tremendous respect.
That is breaking news, Michael Barrett. I don't know what to say. I think you just ended the show right there, because I'm shocked. I didn't see that coming.
I have tremendous respect for the office of Prime Minister, and I think that it's something that the occupant, whichever party they belong to, that they are caretakers of that office and the reputation of that office, and they need to be careful who they do business with and who they give the halo effect of brand Canada to. And so I think that that there's damage that's being done by Justin Trudeau to Brand Canada, to the brand and the confidence Canadians have in the Prime Minister's office. And so we need to we really need to demystify and shine some light in on all of the issues surrounding this. We need transparency. We need documents to be released. And just like our colleague Pierre Poilievre has said, we need Justin Trudeau to come to committee and to testify without invoking cabinet confidence.
This is not the first time that public servants has been muzzled. It happened a few years back with military procurement. The public service were not allowed to speak. I guess they're muzzled for life, if memory serves, for speaking about how, in terms of military equipment, how that process was handled. And that is another situation where I think if the tables were turned and we were in power, Michael, I think the media would have been rolling on the floor, yelling and screaming, and it became maybe a day or two story in the media a few years ago.
Yeah, and this is very much not the sunny ways that we were promised by Justin Trudeau. All of this, and the muzzling continues. We know that there's non-disclosure agreements that are forced on exempt political staff in the Trudeau government. We know they're forced on all kinds of public service employees, and we know now that people that want to do business with or participate with this organization, that the Liberals wanted to engage in this $912 million contract. They were sworn to secrecy. They were muzzled. So this is not a transparency. This is not a government that's open by default. This is, cloak and dagger, and it's not what Canadians deserve.
I know Justin Trudeau always used to say better is always possible, but it appears worse is possible as well, and he's achieved that. Absolutely, and better is possible. And people have asked, if Conservatives want to bring down the government over this, to which the reply is, well, first of all, the NDP and the Liberals shuttered Parliament, so that wouldn't be possible. But what I think our objective should be as the official opposition is using the parliamentary tools that are available and getting all the information, and then giving Canadians the opportunity to judge the facts for themselves. And we'll take a look in September at what the situation on the ground is. But we know that better is possible. We have the leadership going on right now. We have great candidates running, and I look forward to running under the Conservative banner with our next leader. And better is on the horizon. Michael Barrett, thank you very much. Always a pleasure to have you on the show to talk about the ethics violations that Justin Trudeau has. We almost have to have a permanent seat for you with the amount of times Justin Trudeau messes up like this. And maybe we'll have to call it the Michael Barrett show. You're on so much. So we appreciate all the job you're doing on the ethics file. Keep up the good work.
Thanks very much, Jamie. Appreciate your work as well. Take care.
Michael Barrett, the Member of Parliament for Leeds-Grenville-Thousand Island and Rideau Lakes in Eastern Ontario, also the Ethics Shadow Minister, discussing the WE scandal that seems to be unfolding with new revelations daily in connections with the Liberal Party of Canada. Hang in tight. Real quick, we're going to have Marty Morantz coming up next. He's the Shadow Minister for National Revenue. We're going to talk about the CERB program and ideas that the Conservative Party have for employers and employees to get back to work and get the economy going as we start to reopen all across this country. Remember, low taxes, less government, more freedom. That's the blueprint. Hang in tight. Part 2 coming up. Welcome back to part 2 of the Blueprints, Canada's Conservative podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Schmale, Member of Parliament for Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock, broadcasting live from my constituency office in Lindsay, Ontario. We had a great show of the Blueprint in the first half with Michael Barrett, the Ethics Shadow Minister, to talk about the WE scandal that seems to be unfolding daily with new revelations. So if you want to help us push back against the Liberal agenda, because we need your help to do that, you need to like, comment, subscribe, share to this program, get this message out and help us push back. Also, if you are watching it on this program, but would also maybe like to listen to it as you go about your daily activities, we have platforms such as Castbox, Google Play, iTunes, you name it, it's out there. Spotify, I should say, it's all there for your enjoyment. Please listen to us and tell your friends about it. It's very important. So, as promised, we have Marty Morantz. He's the Shadow Minister for National Revenue. He's also the Member of Parliament for Charleswood, St. James, Assiniboia, and Headingley. He's going to look at the Conservatives' plan for back to work and the back to work bonus. Thank you very much, Marty, for joining us.
Well, Jamie, first let me say thank you so much for having me on. This is my first time on the Blueprint, so I'm excited to be here.
Well, it won't be your last. You're elected in 2019, so we're excited to have you on the team, and we appreciate all the work you're doing.
Yeah.
So you are the Shadow Minister for National Revenue, and the CERB program is alive and well, and that was the $2,000 a month given to Canadians who were forced to take off work because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And now, as provinces all across the country and territories start to reopen, there is a problem with, I think, in every community, with employers looking for employees, but employees not wanting to take a huge hit and losing the CERB, because as it's set up now, and maybe Marty, you want to go into this and expand on this more, as soon as you reach over that $1,000 mark of earnings above the 2,000, you're basically cut off. So you lose everything. Maybe, Marty, you wanted to go into a bit more detail about that.
Well, I think it's important to go back to the beginning of the CERB when the pandemic was declared, Jamie. You recall it was implemented as an emergency program to assist people who lost their work due to the COVID crisis. And originally, it was supposed to be $2,000 a month. And actually, the original rule was that you couldn't work at all. We pushed back against that and said, well, look, you're penalizing people for doing any kind of work at all. And the government, as is the case with so many of these emergency programs, instead of collaborating with us in the House of Commons, basically is playing defense when we come back with common sense solutions. So we were the ones that pushed them, and they agreed to bring in the $1,000 limit. The $1,000 limit doesn't really solve the problem entirely either. It becomes a very expensive $1. When somebody earns $1,001, they get essentially kicked off the CERB. So that $1 costs them $2,000, and so it creates a disincentive to work. And I can tell you, in my travels through my riding, and maybe you've been hearing the same thing, I'm hearing from business people daily that they are having just a very difficult time getting people to come back to work because they're concerned about losing their CERB, and they don't know, for example, and to be fair to the employee, whether the job will be there for very long because of the state of the economy, and they could come back to work, lose their CERB, and lose their job and find themselves with nothing. So we've been proposing, just like we did with the original $1,000, just like we did with amendments to the other emergency programs, a very common sense idea. And the idea is formulated in the words, the back to work bonus. And what the back to work bonus essentially proposes is that if you earn $1 more, you don't lose your entire CERB. You lose 50 cents. So that if you earn between $1,001 and $5,000, eventually your CERB will be phased out by 50 cents per dollar. And that's a common sense way of saying to someone, hey, you can work and have your CERB too. So you can earn if you earn $4,000, you'll receive $1,000 in CERB. Once you hit $5,000, you won't receive any CERB at all. But it's far better to do it that way than to say to somebody, if you take an extra shift, you're at risk of losing your benefit. So ironically, a program that was designed to help people during an emergency has created an emergency employment issue. And I want to highlight this point because I was looking at these stats earlier. Canada had in May the highest unemployment rate among OECD nations at 13.7%. To put it in contrast, the average was 8.36%. So I think it wouldn't be hard to draw a direct line between some of the difficulties we're having getting people back to work and the flaws inherent in the CERB program.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about the spending that's been going on too, because you mentioned it. I know you're on the finance committee. So the deficit in Canada, it's growing. It looks like it's well past the $1 trillion. Sorry, the debt is going to be past $1 trillion, and deficit is going to be about $343 billion. So basically, the Liberals through this pandemic, and when people are told to stay home and businesses to shut, they need to be compensated accordingly. But basically, what they've done is doubled spending of the federal
Yeah.
treasury.
Well, I think every Canadian should be concerned. I'm hearing this from my constituents as well. To put this in perspective again, in 2015, the Liberals inherited a balanced budget, and they put in place a self-imposed rule that they would run a couple of years of small deficits and balance the budget in 2019. They didn't hold to that rule and ended up spending over $80 billion in excess of what they collected. Then they said, well, it's true that we did that, but we're going to keep our spending at 30% of the gross domestic product or lower. And then even before the pandemic started, they missed that mark too. So the problem I have is that there are no fiscal rules. And we desperately need them. Just to your point, if you could call a normal deficit under the Trudeau government was around 25 or $26 billion. This year, the parliamentary budget officer has said it's going to be just shy of $350 billion. And I want to highlight another point because I asked Yves Giroux, the parliamentary budget officer, this very question, because as we know, there was some fraud going on and perhaps still is in the CERB program, and the public servants were being instructed to ignore it. Mr. Giroux told us at Finance Committee that any money that's gone out the door, taxpayers' dollars that have gone out the door in fraudulent claims, he's not including that in his deficit forecast because he is assuming that these programs are being run properly. So the deficit actually could be far higher than even what he's currently predicting. Another point about this is this massive deficit of $350 billion, more than 12 times what it was supposed to be under ordinary circumstances, has now pushed Canada's federal net debt to over $1 trillion. So it's a huge concern. I can talk all day about this. Interest rates is a major concern on my mind because they're so low right now. But if interest rates go up, that will be a major issue for Canadian taxpayers to have to deal with.
Well, a lot of the discussion too, even prior to the 2019 election, in the 2015 election, every day, and I know you know this, Marty, but every day in the House, it was, what is your plan to balance the budget? Because in the bad times, which will eventually come, you will need that fiscal room to maneuver.
Yeah.
And we were always told, don't worry about it. We need to keep spending. Well, the economy is going fairly well in some sectors, in some sectors it wasn't. But that was the time to balance the budget and get some debt paid off. So when the situation like COVID happened, you had a bit more wiggle room, and we aren't putting more debt on future generations because this, I'm sure you can expand on this if you want, actually hampers future governments from improving or tweaking programs because their financial capacity to do so will be quite limited.
Well, you're exactly right. And the real key to all of this is interest rates. So right now, interest rates are low, and they did drop throughout the beginning of the pandemic, largely due to historic levels of quantitative easing, essentially the Bank of Canada printing money and buying up bonds to keep rates low. But they can't keep that up forever. And
Yep.
as the economy recovers and inflation starts to kick in, the only tools the bank really has is to increase interest rates. So I just want to highlight this point. So in 2019, the interest charge against Canada's operating budget was roughly $24 billion on a $300 billion federal budget. A 1% increase on $1 trillion of debt alone is $10 billion. And I remember very well, a lot of the young folks today might not remember how high interest rates have been historically. But if you lived through the 80s and
Oh
90s, I
my.
certainly remember
Yes.
my first mortgage on my first place was I had a 12% interest rate on my first mortgage on my home in
I
the
think you got lucky
late
at
80s.
12.
I did. And I remember when Paul Martin had to cut transfer payments in his 95 budget, the federal government was paying interest at about 7%. There's really no reason fundamentally why interest rates could not creep up. And that's what I think they're an existential threat to the ability of the government of Canada to do its work. Now, as long as interest rates stay low, it's possible they could muddle through this. But the minute they start going up, um, the cost of the debt, the federal debt, will increase, and be a charge against Canadian taxpayers without doubt.
According to documentation I have, the federal debt is actually, because of this massive amount of debt we've piled on already, we are now increased our debt to GDP to almost 50%,
Yes.
which is quite staggering considering, as you mentioned a little while ago, we were always in the high 20s, well, not always, in the last 10, 12,
Yeah.
15 years, it's always been the high 20s,
Yeah.
low 30s.
Yeah. And I would add to that, it would be wrong to assume that that's the only debt that matters. There is only one economy.
Mhm.
The gross domestic product of a country of Canada of Canada as a country is just over $2 trillion. So as to your point, $1 trillion in debt is 50%. But what we're not including in that is the subnational debt. That is the debt held by each individual province, the debt held by each individual municipality, and personal debt. But at the very least, when you're talking about government, I think you should be including provincial debt as well. So, because we're comparing ourselves to other countries that are some of them are unitary states that don't have subnational debt. So, like Germany and France and the UK, they have a one government debt basically, but we have in Canada the federal government, 10 provinces and 3 territories. So there's it's Canada as a country also highly um, supported by its natural resource industry, which this government has really done its best to keep down. And if we're going to have talking about recovery, which is the next step, we have not heard the Liberals even mention the word. There's no plan for an economic recovery yet that's been placed by the government. We need to have this country's industries firing on all cylinders to make sure we come out of this as best as possible.
I couldn't agree with you more. Marty, we're running out of time. Any parting words based on what we started the topic about? I do love talking debt and deficits because I think Canadians really need to know the impact of the decisions being made by this Liberal government. But any constructive comments you'd like to add in terms of reopening the economy safely and getting people back to work, businesses up and running so that they can create jobs, opportunity, and wealth in our communities?
Well, of course, we need to have the government of Canada needs to put forward a plan for the reopening of the economy. Different regions are reopening at different rates. And I think we need to have a comprehensive plan. I think the government should be taking seriously our recommendation with respect to the back to work bonus. I think any discussion or talk of increasing taxes at this point by the federal government would be sure folly. And what they should really be doing is looking at ways they can reduce taxation in order to stimulate the economy, because it's well understood that a dollar in the pocket of a Canadian taxpayer is a far more efficient driver of the economy than a dollar being controlled centrally by the federal government. And so I think we need to have a set of policies that unleashes the enormous power of over 20 million Canadian workers to help them get back to work safely with the proper PPE, because that is key in all this. And again, another area where the Liberals have fumbled the ball with all kinds of mistakes around literally throwing away PPE when we needed it the most, or giving it away. It's really almost, you can't make this stuff up. But those would be my comments, Jamie. I think we need to come forward with our own ideas too, and we have. And I think the back to work bonus would be an enormous way, very powerful way of unleashing the economy. And I'll just add one other point if we have time, Jamie. I've been making the rounds of the Canada Summer Jobs Grants programs just to meet the students that have been hired by local businesses. And I'm actually being told that they're having trouble hiring people to pay them with the grant, because those folks are on the CERB. So this is a problem that the government absolutely needs to address, and the quicker the better.
All right, we will have you back on, because I think you almost quoted John F. Kennedy there about $1 in the pocket of the consumer is better in the pocket of government. Believe it or not, that was JFK. So I believe who said that, if memory serves. And I do want to I'll have you on again. We'll unpack the reasons why. I know our conservatives understand why raising taxes, especially at a time like this, is such a bad idea, especially if the government feels it needs more money. This is the worst thing they could do. And so we'll have you on and unpack that again.
I'd love to chat about that.
Yeah, I do. I think that's an important topic. So we will set that up. So thank you very much, Marty Morantz, for joining us.
Appreciate it.
The Shadow Minister for National Revenue is also the Member of Parliament for Charleswood, St. James, Assiniboia, Headingley. We appreciate his time out in the beautiful province of Manitoba. Remember, we need your... Thank you, Marty. Be good. Remember, we need your help to push back against the ever-moving Liberal agenda. We need you to like the program, comment, subscribe, share. Again, your support is greatly appreciated. And if you can't watch us here on Facebook, you can also download us on platforms like Google Play, iTunes, Spotify, CastBox, you name it, and you can listen to it as you go about your daily activities. Anything we can do to make the job a little easier so we can help get that message out. We'll be back again next Tuesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time, because we do not slow down. There is a lot going on. The Liberals may be shutting down Parliament, but we are going to keep pushing back and ensuring that you are informed as to what is going on in Parliament Hill and how we are pushing back and supporting you and respectful of your hard-earned tax dollars. And as always, remember, low taxes, less government, more freedom. That's the blueprint. Thanks for joining us.